Welcome back. Time now for The Clash. Boris Johnson is facing pushback from within the Tory party over his green revolution, following fears it could cost them red wall voters. A fiery WhatsApp exchange between Concerned MPs and Energy Minister Anne-Marie Trevelyan has been exposed after polling revealed 47% of petrol car owners back the Conservatives. And you know what? These brave dissidents are right. As I wrote in my column for the Mail Online today, I fear Boris's zealotry on the issue is so out of step with his Tory base that it could end up his undoing. The crucial question is, who will be paying for the measures required to reach net zero by 2050? Is it you and me? And how is that fair when other major emitters like Germany, Canada, Australia, the US and particularly China continue to drag their feet? So let's debate this now. Joining me, Lee Anderson, the Tory MP for Ashfield and one of the ministers who spoke out on this WhatsApp. Facing him is Stanley Johnson, the former MEP and environmentalist. Great to have you both here. So Lee, can you just explain first exactly what this WhatsApp conversation was about and why Tory MPs are so concerned about this net zero push?
Well, thanks for having me on, Dan. First of all, I'm going to say from the outset that I'm not a climate change denier. I think we all have a responsibility to leave our planet in a much better condition than when we arrive for our kids and our grandkids. But we need to remind ourselves that the climate change is a global problem, and therefore it requires an international, not just a national solution. And I guess that was sort of the gist of the conversation in the WhatsApp group. Very unfortunate it got leaked. But that's the sort of point I was making.
Yeah, because your fear, presumably, is the fact that how on earth is any hard-working voter going to be able to afford up to £14,000 to replace their gas boiler with a hydrogen boiler or a heat pump, which, by the way, then makes it much more expensive to heat your home, not to mention the cost of getting rid of your diesel or petrol vehicle?
Yeah, and that's it. Dan. You know, in the UK, we're responsible for around 1% of the total global emissions, compared with it's 15% for the USA, massive 29% from China. And China, remember, they're opening up coal mines, in part for new coal-fired power stations, which they are building at an alarming pace. Now, that doesn't excuse us in the UK from taking a sensible approach to tackling our own emissions, but we should try and do this on a level playing field. Now, we could turn off all the electricity and gas supply in our country right now, this second, stop all the cars from running, the buses, the trains and whatever, stop all the factories from working. What would that do to save the planet? Very, very little. But on this journey to COP26, if we could get places like China, India, the US and Canada, to play their part, then we could really make a difference. So the question is, do we want to take this seriously? If we do, then get these other countries on board. Don't penalise our own people, because at the end of the day, it's places like Ashfield and Mansfield and Bolsover in the area I live, where people are much poorer than other areas of the country that's seen their pits closed, our factories closed. They're going to bear the brunt of the cost. And, it's up to me to speak out for them. And I think if we go on this journey and we get it right, and I hope we do, and get this level playing field, then we should be okay. But at the moment, I'm a little bit concerned.
OK, Stanley Johnson, your response to that?
Good, good to hear. Good to hear Lee Anderson make these points.
But you don't agree?
Sorry. The point is this. I mean, he is an MP. He is absolutely right to worry about what his constituents think. He's absolutely right to worry about the expenses they may have to bear. He's absolutely right to say we need a global approach to this. Now, I can tell you that this country and this leadership is making every effort to come to COP26 and to get a strong international agreement, which does indeed go as far as it possibly can to getting a level playing field, and the effort which Alex Sharma and people are making to try and make sure, for example, the Chinese really come forward with what's called nationally determined contributions, which do actually bite domestically in China, do ensure that coal mines are properly abated, that the coal building program, doesn't go ahead full steam. China, by the way, is committed to, as it were, peaking its emissions by 2030. It's committed to reaching net zero 10 years later than we might. But the point he is making is still a good point. It is a good point. And one of the things we need as a party is to be able to point out to the electorate that yes, they are right to be concerned, but there's a whole lot of pluses out there as well. And if you look at it, for example, Amber Rudd today had an article in the Daily Telegraph where she said it's critics of net zero who are unconservative because they're not necessarily focusing on the jobs which are going to be created by energy-saving programs, by the transformation of industry. They're not focusing, and I know you raised some points, but they're not focusing on the fact that actually some expenses are going to go down. Now, I make one last point, if I've got time for that, Dan, and that is as follows, because I share Lee Anderson's concern. We must above all listen to the people who are going to have to bear the burden, and
they hate these policies, Stanley. They hate these policies.
Well, I want to say that maybe there's a further effort of explanation which has to be made. But I go beyond that, and I'd say this: if we have what's called a proper pricing policy for polluters, and we all subscribed to the polluter pays principle a long time ago, then there will indeed be money available to help ease the transition for some sectors of society who may suffer from the transition which is going to happen. Do you see what I'm getting at? And of course, we have grants there.
Because, Lee, just from a purely political point of view, and that was the discussion that was going on in this WhatsApp group, which featured a whole load of Tory MPs, you're concerned because who owns the bulk of petrol and diesel cars, for example? It's Tory voters. And you're also concerned because it's poor people that will be hit hardest by this, right?
Yeah, absolutely right, Dan. I have a responsibility as a responsible MP to look out for my constituents. And you're quite right. It will affect voters. And that's why I'm interested in the detail. Now, if we're expecting my voters in Ashfield and Eastwood to bear the brunt of this cost, which I hope they don't, but what are other people going to do? And I'll put this question to Stanley. Stanley, are you prepared to give up all your foreign travel, all your foreign trips, your holidays, your trips in the car, your trips on a bus, your trips on a train? Are you prepared to give all that up for the sake of saving the planet if my constituents pay a little bit more out their pay packet?
Stanley?
The point I am making is that if you have proper programs, then there will be sectors of society, and there'll be agriculture, there'll be energy, there'll be industry, and it'll be perfectly clear how many emissions those programs can go. And
but can you understand Lee's point, Stanley, that it's pretty unfair for a working class voter who doesn't have lots of foreign holidays, who doesn't jet off all around the world all the time and emitting huge emissions with their lifestyle, but then is told by the government, you've got to stump up £10,000 for a new boiler. That just feels completely unfair.
That is exactly where I come back to my point. If we had pressed harder with what we should have been doing, which is having proper systems of carbon pricing, we would indeed have found that resources are available to, as it were, meet the concerns of the disadvantaged sectors of society. Those funds would be there to enable the transition, because the macroeconomics are 100% in favor of action to deal with climate change. And I would say in some areas they're in favor of doing that, regardless of whether the whole world follows, because these are good things to do just in themselves. They generate jobs. They generate improved water pollution, improved air, lots of things like that.
Lee Anderson, I'm sensing, especially amongst GBNews viewers, an increased fury about China, the Chinese Communist government. Obviously, we had their despicable behaviour at the outset of the COVID-19 crisis, but now we know what they're doing environmentally. And I know Stanley says their emissions will peak in 2030. But I mean, come on, they're increasing by the day. Right now, 29.1% of global emissions, all from China. We're less than 1%. Are you sensing from your constituencies, Lee Anderson, a growing anger towards China and the Chinese government?
I am, Dan, to be honest. I think China are cheating at the moment. They're not playing on a level playing field. They're making all sorts of promises for the future. That remains to be seen whether that's true or not. I've got my doubts, and many of my constituents have. And you know what? We do need a sensible energy policy in this country. And I think in this country, in the UK, we have to accept that fossil fuels, oil, coal and gas do have a big part to play in the transition period as we adopt this green energy, this green policy, if you like. It plays a massive part. The ironic part, Dan, for me is we're importing coal from places like China and Russia and Australia. We're putting them in big tankers, and we bring them halfway around the world, putting God knows what into the atmosphere. Yet in our own country, we sat upon metallurgical coal, high-grade coal, which most countries would give their high teeth for, and we can use that coal to make our great British steel, to make the wind turbines, to drive the green energy revolution, if you like. But I will go back to my previous point to Stanley. It's unfair, Stanley. If the transition period doesn't pan out like you think it will, and I hope it does, are you prepared to give up your foreign holidays, your trips abroad, your first-class air tickets, to save the planet?
So Stanley, Lee
I'll
wants
tell
a
you,
direct answer on that.
Well, I'm going to give you a direct answer. If the government says the aviation sector has to have a certain carbon budget for its next 10 years, then they will deal with that by a pricing policy, and that is what will generate
which totally cuts out
the ability to stick to the program.
But that makes travel for the rich, doesn't it? And that's the whole issue here. Again, it's the poorest in society who lose their ability to travel, and I think that's a disgrace.
Do you think the poorest in society want to see a world in which we have forest fires, we have droughts, we have climate change, we have all the things we're talking about?
That's all they want to see, a world that's fair.
And it's not fair, is it, if Leonardo DiCaprio and Prince Harry and Meghan can go around the world on their private jets because they pay for carbon offset, but a hard-working taxi driver in Lee Anderson's constituency and Ashfield can't go on their annual holiday to the Costa del Sol. That's not fair.
Well, I want to tell you that if you're not in the rich world, you look at it and you say, well, who actually used up, the 1.1 degree which we've already got, which we've already increased? Well, it wasn't India, it wasn't China who did all that. It was basically the rich West world. So from that point of view, I'm 100% with Lee Anderson to say there's equity within countries, but there's also international equity, which is one of the reasons why at COP26 a huge effort has to be made also to generate the funds to bring the developing countries along. And taking the
Stanley, do we have to toughen up on China? Do we have to toughen up on China? Doesn't the government need to stand up to China?
Well, I don't know what you're really talking about here, Dan, because my understanding is that the Chinese, what are they now? They're 1.4 billion people. There are 400 million people who are now in middle income range in China. I think the Chinese government has grasped the fact that in their own interest, let alone our interest, in their own interest, and I've been to China, I should think 15 or 20 times over a period of 60 years, in their own interest, they absolutely have to push ahead with stringent environmental measures. And quite apart from anything else, they will find that the export of their products will run up against carbon border taxes or anything like that. So I don't think we should say China's not doing it. China will do it. And by the way, it is bound to do it.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.